Readings and Gospel for the first Sunday of Advent, Year A. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "As it was in Noah's day, so will it be when the Son of Man comes. For in those days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, taking wives, taking husbands, right up to the day Noah went into the ark, and they suspected nothing till the flood came and swept all away. It will be like this when the Son of Man comes. Then of two men in the fields, one is taken, one is left. Two women at the millstone grinding, one is taken, one left. So stay awake, because you do not know the day when your master is coming. You may be quite sure of this, that if the householder had known at what time of the night the burglar would come, he would have stayed awake and would not have allowed anyone to break through the wall of his house. Therefore you too must stand ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." The Gospel of the Lord. The theme of watchfulness is often referred to in the Scriptures. Now, who is this watchman? Well, he is the one who foregoes his sleep and keeps guard so as to prevent enemies invading under the cover of darkness. Alertness and vigilance, or prayerful listening, call it what you like, are particularly associated with Advent. Today, Jesus says, "Be on your guard, stay awake. You do not know the day when the Son of Man will return." Even in the secular world, our lack of watchfulness or vigilance can have disastrous consequences. For instance, this week in the news we heard about the heart-rending story of little 5-year-old Logan, whose life was cut short at the hands of his parents. Part of the blame was attributed to the hospital and social services, who, because of lack of alertness, they failed to notice the obvious signs of abuse on the little boy's body. He should never have died, and he wouldn't have died if these agencies were alert and watchful. Similarly, in the spiritual zone, if we're not watchful or alert, we can actually be lulled into a kind of spiritual complacency, which presents the ideal conditions for a subtle assault of the enemy. Our enemy will be delighted to entice us into a settled, cozy routine of worship and even prayer, which has little or no bearing on how we live our lives in the world. Also, when we are spiritually in slumberland, we are unable to hear the voice of the Lord, who calls us into a deeper relationship with himself, so that our spiritual compass may stay pointed in the right direction. The secular run-up to Christmas, which coincides with Advent, is often a time when our antennae for the material can be more sensitively attuned than our antennae for the spiritual. It's so easy to get caught up in the frantic merry-go-round of shopping, cooking, parties and presents. I'm not saying these are not important, but they could dominate this period leading up to Christmas. Now, in this frame of mind, perhaps we're more on the lookout for bargains or Black Friday and special offers, rather than on the lookout for what God is offering us in Christ. Our spiritual senses can be dulled to such an extent that we can so easily be taken unawares and succumb to the temptation of making Christmas more a midwinter festival than a celebration of God becoming man in Jesus for our salvation. I'm sure you've all heard of Delia Smith. She was a kind of a cookery goddess some years ago, but in her introduction to her book, A Feast for Advent, she wrote the following: "It was about 11:30 on Christmas Eve a few years ago. I had arrived at my local church to celebrate midnight mass, But as I sat there, I simply had to face up to the fact that my tired, aching body was in no fit state to celebrate anything. How incongruous that in order to celebrate the second greatest feast in the Christian calendar, I had become so ensnared in the trappings of what the world makes of Christmas that I was miserable, not joyful at all. But at that moment of self-revelation, I realized I was simply too exhausted to celebrate this, the greatest birth in the history of mankind. It was really a wake-up call for me. If we can identify even with some of what Delia says, it can also lead to a self-awakening for us as well. Thank you all for listening. God bless you all.